Side Hustle Show 219, growing traffic, monetization, list building, a day in the life, and more. 20 questions with Nick.
Welcome to the Side Hustle Show, where aspiring part-time entrepreneurs learn how to turn their side hustle dreams into reality. Because your 9 to 5 may make you a living, but your 5 to 9 makes you alive. And now, your host, Nick Loper.
What's up? Nick Loper here. Welcome to the Side Hustle Show, special solo show for you today. We're taking a break from the interview format and diving back into the listener mailbag again for another edition of 20 Questions with Nick. As usual, lots of fun and challenging questions came in over the last 3 or 4 months since we did this in the fall. And I've selected 20 to run through today for your listening pleasure. And as always, hopefully your benefit if you're in the same boat as the asker. Notes and links for this one are at sidehustlenation.com/Q&A3. Of course, if you have a question, feel free to send it over to nick@sidehustlenation.com. That is my email. I can't guarantee an email response, but I will do my best. But you just might be featured in the next round of 20 questions. Before we dive in, let me take a moment to thank today's sponsor, sanebox.com. If you're spending too much time on email, you need to check out SaneBox. Their software plugs into your email account and intelligently filters the messages you need to see from all the rest. Visit sanebox.com/sidehustle today to start your 2-week free trial, no credit card required, and watch how it changes your relationship with your inbox. If you love it, that link will also give you $20 off any paid plan. I'll be back to tell you a little bit more about SaneBox and my experience with it so far before we wrap up the last few questions of this episode. Ready? Let's do it. Question number 1 comes in from Patrick. He asks, how do you work? What's a typical day in the life of Nick? Well, a day in the life, this is going to be a snapshot of early 2017, so of course, subject to change. Right now, waking up around 6:15 or 6:30, or whenever our 1-year-old wakes up, which today happened to be quite a bit earlier, getting him dressed, helping make breakfast, and usually what I do is make a breakfast smoothie with vanilla protein powder, with frozen blueberries, with avocado, and almond butter. Lots of calories and super good. The baby and my wife, she drives him to daycare, and they leave usually around 7, which is when I take the dog out and kind of start my day. Awesome to get some fresh air first thing in the morning when you're just walking him up and down the street until he does his business. And after that, I might spend a few minutes kind of cleaning up from the breakfast rush. But really by 7:15, 7:30 is when I'm starting work. I normally start work on my treadmill desk and try and tackle my number 1 top priority task that I identified the night before. Like this new micro habit of this year of doing at least one proactive task before email has been really helpful toward building positive momentum in the day. And on top of that, I think the treadmill desk thing gets the blood flowing, gets you moving, kind of builds that physical momentum towards the day as well. But by 9 o'clock, I'm usually ready for a little bit of a break, and probably already walked 2 or 3 miles by that point. So I'll go get a snack or make some tea or decide to do a quick workout or shower. More frequently than going to the gym lately, I've been doing like home-based workouts, kettlebells and push-ups, and kind of like a homemade CrossFit style of quick workout, usually just 15 minutes or so. My first meetings of the day usually start at 10 o'clock, although a couple days a week I have mastermind meetings that start a little bit earlier. But 10 to 1 is usually in meetings, be that podcast recordings, trying to vet guests, or do meetings with other partners, or just trying to figure out what's going on. Maybe that's interviews for other shows, and sometimes that's producing this week's episode, which I actually usually do on Tuesdays. Usually have lunch between 1 or 2, and actually this is kind of weird. I actually usually eat a breakfast lunch, so it's like lentils and scrambled eggs with spinach and garlic and cumin, and top it off with avocado and sriracha and salsa. It's super good. In the afternoon, I'm working on content for the Side Hustle site. I'm catching up on email from the morning, doing marketing-related tasks or longer-term projects. For instance, when I was writing the Buy Buttons book, I blocked off 4 hours every Monday afternoon to get that done. And it ended up taking a little bit more time than that, but just putting that block on the calendar, signaled to me that it was important. I start winding down around 5, which means, again, taking the Side Hustle Shih Tzu out for his, evening duties, cleaning up the house before Bryn and the boy get home. They get home around 5:15, 5:30, and then we get to work, prepping dinner and playing with the kid. After dinner, you usually have an hour or 2 of playtime before, he starts to get tired and is no longer fit for the land of the living, and it's time for bed, which is usually around 8 these days. 8 to 9. is usually, if this is too detailed for you, I'm sorry. 8 to 9 is usually spent catching up on email or other tasks from the day that just didn't get done and kind of planning out tomorrow's plan of attack, the top priority tasks, looking at the calendar, seeing what's going on, or, sometimes, watching Netflix, catching up. But lately Bryn wants to spend her evening time like editing pictures from her photo side hustle or designing t-shirts for her new Merch by Amazon biz. You can check out the Merch by Amazon episode in the archives from just a couple weeks ago. Lately, man, I don't know, this is the new like parenting life. Lately we're in bed by like 9:30 or 10. She got me a Kindle for Christmas. So I've been reading a little bit more at night lately, which I feel is a good thing, kind of getting back into that reading habit. And I still do try and practice like that nightly meditation. Usually do it like while lying in bed. Sometimes it makes me feel totally crazy that my brain can't shut off. But in a way, I think it is helpful to try and force yourself to quiet your mind and fall asleep. So, focus on your breath. As you wander, go back and focus on your breath. And that's been kind of helpful in at least some nights, curing some of that nighttime insomnia. We're both off Fridays, most Fridays, and there's no daycare that day. So we have a 3-day weekend almost every week, which is pretty awesome. Question number 2 comes from Jonathan. He asks, what's the download tool you use on Side Hustle Nation? Did you develop it, or is it a WordPress plugin, or what? So Jonathan, I'm actually using Lead Pages for that. It delivers the files and it syncs up with Aweber, my email service provider. If you want to check it out yourself, it's sidehustlenation.com/leadpages is my affiliate link for that. There are some free alternatives. You might be able to get this done using SumoMe. I was never able to like fully get it functional, but you might be able to do that. There is a plugin called Pop-Up Maker that you might also be able to use and, embed the form fill from your email service provider in that to get a similar kind of 2-step opt-in if you want to piece it together with some free alternatives. Question number 3 comes from Bob. He asks, can I make money showing people how to sell on eBay? And the answer to that is obviously yes. People have been doing that for the last 20 years. The challenges, or what I think you're going to need to get started, is probably a unique angle to come at it from and to attract an audience in that field. Like you can just look on Amazon, and check out the bestseller ranks of books that talk about selling on eBay. So there's a market for that. There's a market for people trying to learn this stuff. Just a kind of a matter of carving out your space in that field. Question number 4 comes from Thomas. He says, in my eyes, you are one of the many people who have made it in the online space. Well, thank you for that, Thomas. I'm still working on it, or working on making it every day. Granted, he goes on to say, granted, there are different levels of success, and I'm sure you wouldn't mind another 1 million or so followers. But what sort of struggles do you have at this stage of the game? Struggles for me are email, like I mentioned at the top of the show, trying to figure out what to work on next, trying to figure out, the next content ideas. Spend a lot of time vetting guests right now and dealing with, all of the pitches, trying to filter out the pitches that come across my desk. I've probably talked about this before, how the good pitches are great because you're like, all right, let's make something happen. And the bad pitches are great because you're like, I can just ignore you. It's the mediocre pitches, or the medium ones, that really take the most time. You're like, okay, there might be something here. There might be something to serve Side Hustle Nation here, but I'm not, and then you just spend all this time and kind of brain power trying to figure out what that angle is going to be. But that means there's always going to be something to struggle on. Probably, the biggest challenge, or one of the biggest challenges, is doing important work instead of easy work. It's easy to fall into a routine, and this is true for entrepreneurs, this is true for employees, that before long, you don't really question it at all. And that's just the way it is. That's just what I do. And so really one of the biggest challenges too is figuring out, for me this year and beyond is, figuring out how to serve Side Hustle Nation in the best possible way, and then going out and executing on that. And don't get me wrong, that's a great challenge to have, but I've never been here before. So I'm not sure what exactly to do next. And it's helpful to have masterminds and peers who've kind of, gone down similar paths. Of course, part of that is going to be staying true to myself, true to my family, and true to the lifestyle that we want, and really sculpting the business to fit around that lifestyle. So, that's pretty much the same challenge as everybody else, right? Just at a different nuances to those challenges. Question 5 comes from Lauren. She asks, so I followed the step-by-step plan in your course. She's talking about the KindleLaunchCourse.com and got over 1,000 free downloads for my book. Unfortunately, actual paid sales have been lackluster. Do you have any tips or know of a course from someone reputable like yourself who can help me generate continued sales from Amazon? So Lauren, 1,000 downloads is great. That's awesome validation for your product. That's, 1,000 people that are reading your stuff that you might otherwise never have found it. But the secret to sustained sales on Amazon or anywhere else really is sustained traffic. And that can come from Amazon itself, like we talked about with Dave Chesson on Kindle Research and keywords, and internal Amazon ranking factors and stuff like that, or it can come from your own outside efforts. So within Amazon, you can put on your blogger hat, your SEO hat, and think what keywords people are going to search for to find your book. Can you include those if you haven't already in your subtitle, your title, your description, your keywords that are in your KDP dashboard? Probably doesn't make sense to change the title and cover at this point, but the subtitle and the description are probably ripe for that. Now, one thing I've been testing the past couple months is Amazon's internal advertising service, AMS, Amazon Marketing Service, I think it's called. The ads I've made for buy buttons have been profitable, and I've actually gotten a little obsessed in checking their performance every day, but I'm having a little bit of a harder time developing a profitable campaign for Work Smarter and kind of scaling up the sales from some of my older titles. But I think it's a really cool platform. You just target keywords. You can target other titles in your niche. It's a fantastic way to get your book in front of potential readers for really, I think my average CPC is, 14 cents or something. So it's really kind of a low cost way to see if, there's demand for this to drive some sustained traffic. Now, the other thing to consider to potentially boost conversions, in Lauren's case, would be to add a paperback and an audiobook edition. Paperback at the very least, because it's easy to do through CreateSpace, kind of like they have a what you see is what you get editor. I think it's pretty easy to format for there. I think you're going to see some incremental revenue from that, but more importantly, I think it makes your title look more legit because you have a paperback version. It's not just an ebook. And I think it makes the Kindle version appear to be more attractively priced. Now, Lauren has an advantage because she's also got a blog presence where she's got traffic coming to her site every day. And that's some built-in traffic that she could use to drive to Amazon. And in a way, it's a warm traffic. They've already, are somewhat familiar with her and her brand because they're, on her blog. So she could plug the book in a hello bar type of situation, kind of like a call to action bar at the very top of the page, which I ran for a few months with Sumo Me's Smart Bar at the top of the page. Hey, go to this link and, here's 300 plus side hustle ideas for $3.99 or something, I think is what it said. She could do that in the sidebar of her site. She could do that on her about page. Hey, by the way, I wrote this book. I mean, you could include this in your, a link to the book in your email signature, or looking for, Quora posts related to, whatever topic the book is on. Might be some other ways to drive some traffic. But that's the two ingredients, traffic and conversions, and trying to figure out, okay, how do I get traffic there? And just put your thinking cap on and seeing what other sources you might have available to you. Question number 6 is from Ray. He asks, I want to trademark my business name, and I'm asking if you know the steps to make that happen. So Ray, I've never really trademarked anything before, so I'm not sure what that process is like from the ground floor, but I know you can start your application on the USPTO.gov site. That's the United States Patent and Trademark Office, and it's going to cost as little as $225. Now, I've heard that your trademark protection is really only valuable to the extent that you have the budget and the legal firepower to protect it. And that's something we talked about in a little more depth in my episode with small business attorney Elizabeth Potts-Weinstein in episode 204. So I'll link that up for this for you in the show notes at sidehustlenation.com/Q&A3. But the bottom line, especially if you're pre-revenue, I wouldn't let trademark or copyright, I wouldn't really let that be a bottleneck in your business. I'd get started first and then really worry about that down the road. Now, of course, you can run a search at USPTO to make sure no one else is using your name, which might be a good thing to get started before you, rather, that would be a good thing to search for before you get started. But otherwise, I wouldn't stress too much about that at this point. Question 7 comes from Ben. He says, I noticed you've got some really great Pinterest thumbnail images. Have you got any tips or resources or a how-to guide for these images? How do you make them PowerPoint, or how do you pick the typeface and images, etc.? So Ben, thank you. Flattery is a good way to get on the show, of course. So I aim for 1,000 pixels wide by 1,500 pixels tall. And this is just the dimensions that Rosemary Groner gave me from busybudgeter.com in the episode we did, I believe, is episode 142, all about how to drive traffic from Pinterest. I typically use pexels.com, Pexels.com, to source the images, and then use picmonkey.com to add the text overlays. So if you visit pinterest.com/side hustle, you can check out the Best of Side Hustle Nation board. You can see the images that Ben's talking about. Now, I'm clearly not a graphic designer, and so most of these I created myself, but I'm considering testing out some other graphic design service because it can be time consuming to try and pick the right image. It's like, well, maybe I should be doing something else with my time. But on the other hand, it is kind of fun to there's some that I'm like really proud of. Like, man, I really nailed that Pinterest image. Now, question number 8 comes from Steven. He asks, what do you do for motivation when you feel lazy? So if laziness is a constant struggle, I think you really got to reevaluate your big picture why. Like if you're simply not motivated, you probably don't have a strong enough reason to hustle, to be motivated. And that's totally okay. But, for day-to-day bouts of laziness, which definitely come across. So I try these tricks. Number 1, break a sweat. Like get off my butt and get moving, do some exercises, go for, I don't really go for runs anymore, but go do some push-ups, go do some kettlebells, break a sweat. You're not getting any work done anyway, so you might as well do something that's healthy. And I think you're going to find it often sparks some renewed motivation. Tactic number 2 is to make it a game. And sometimes when I have a task I'm procrastinating on or really just don't want to do, I'm going to set up a Pomodoro timer, which is we talked about with John Lee Dumas recently. Work for 25 minutes, take a 5-minute break, and then, reward myself afterwards with a snack or with, checking email or checking Facebook or something, but to gamify it a little bit. And, maybe idea number 3 to combat laziness is to do a micro task. So I live and die by my to-do lists and get a lot of satisfaction from crossing off something off that list, however small it is. But even if that task is, super quick, super easy, sometimes knocking out 2 or 3 of those really easy wins is enough to kick up the motivation, keep plowing ahead and start tackling some bigger projects too. Question 9 comes from Sarah. She asks, if you were to grow a brand new site from 0 traffic to 10,000 visitors in under 30 days, how would you do it? So Sarah, there are a couple things you probably want to have in place before going after 10,000 visitors. Number 1 is a reason why you want or need that traffic in the first place. Like what's the goal of your site? Because chasing traffic for the sake of watching your Google Analytics spike is probably pretty pointless. The second thing to consider is, or do you have a way to capture those people so they keep coming back for more? Like 10,000 people who come and then immediately leave, also pretty pointless. So SumoMe, again, I mentioned that a couple times, is great for that to, capture emails. Lead Pages is great for that. A free plugin called Magic Action Box is great for that. Adds a little call to action box at the end of your posts. But with those housekeeping issues out of the way, I think your ticket to 10,000 visitors is pretty straightforward. First, you've got to create something, Seth Godin's Purple Cow, right? You got to create something remarkable and then tell as many people about it as you can. Now, as far as remarkable content, what I do is try and create something that's twice or 10 times more helpful than anything else on the topic. And it's probably cliche. It's probably been said a million times before, but if you're brand new, you really got to create something that's too good to ignore. For me, an example would be the 200 sharing economy services or 200 sharing economy platforms from last summer. Where it's I was looking for this list. I couldn't find it. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to build it. And on top of that, I had 200 different companies that I could reach out to and say, hey, I featured you in this post. And a lot of them ended up sharing it on their social channels as well. So really, what that looks like logistically is, spending a ton of time on the content itself. All of my top performing posts have, 40 hours or more of work into them. And so, if I have a month to do this in 30 days, if I have 30 days to do this, the first 3 weeks is, creating that content. The final week is spent marketing it. So the more people you can link to, the better, because then you got that excuse to send them a note and see if they'll share it. In question 10, Naveed asks, what are your main sources of monetization from your blog and I guess from life itself? He asks. Obviously, it would appear you get sponsorships for your podcast, affiliate links from posts, ad revenue and all that. But do you do any other consulting for more revenue or engage in other side hustle, other businesses? Well, Naveed, you nailed it. Sponsorship and affiliate revenue are the biggest pieces of the pie right now on Side Hustle Nation. I've scaled back the one-on-one consulting and freelancing in the last year or so, and I'm kind of in the process of rethinking and restructuring the private mastermind group. The mastermind was actually the first monetization channel outside of, the odd, Amazon affiliate link and stuff, where I charged $97 a month for a 3-month mastermind. It took 5 or 6 people at a time. Now, outside of Side Hustle Nation, all of the various side hustles are still bringing the cash register, thankfully. That could be, that's like self-publishing. That's some smaller affiliate sites that I run. That's my Udemy course, my Fiverr sales, my investment experiments. They all kind of fall under that side hustle umbrella, but do add to the bottom line each month. So that's how the monetization picture is coming together for me in 2017 so far. Question 11 comes from Glenn. He says, I've been stuck at 300 daily page views for my blog for a while, and I publish once a week. I was thinking of changing that to every other day, publishing smaller articles, 500 to 700 words. Do you have any thoughts on this? So Glenn, traffic has plateaued, and I'm not sure if more content is the answer. Instead, you have this whole library of content. So maybe investing some more time in marketing those assets you've already created would help move the needle a little bit. For instance, I know we'll beat the Pinterest drum a little bit, but I've seen great results on Pinterest in the last 15 months. I'll link up my case study and tutorial in the show notes for this episode at sidehustlenation.com/Q&A3. Also, the best performing articles for me have been much longer form content, not 500 to 700 words, but more like 3,000 words or more. The 500 word posts rarely seem to do very much for me. And there's some data to suggest that, the posts that are ranking on the first page of Google are all, on average over 2,000 words. That's one part of it. The other thing to consider is, what's the point of each post? And not everything you need to write needs to have a definitive goal or some ulterior motives. But if you start thinking about your blog in that way, it might make your content creation a little bit easier, or at least give it some direction. For example, is this a relationship building post? Where readers get to know a little bit more about you? Is the goal of this post to drive new email subscribers? If it is, how are you going to do that? Do you have a content upgrade? Is the goal of this post to, drive some affiliate sales? All of that will kind of factor into, how you can bring more traffic to your site and also make the most of the traffic that's already coming. Question 12 comes from Olivia. She asks, what's your number one email list building tactic? And so, Olivia, the list building tactic that I've found most effective is creating content-specific opt-in offers and linking those in the post itself or mentioning those on the podcast it's related to. In the case of the blog, the simplest way to do that was just to create a PDF version of the post to download and read later. If you have a really long, epic article, this can be surprisingly effective. So I just looked up the data on one of my posts. So one of my very early posts on the site, more than 5,000 people have opted in for the PDF version of my list of side hustle ideas that you can find at sidehustlenation.com/ideas. That's crazy. And if you think about how high it could have been, because I didn't even install that PDF version. I didn't even give people that option until, the post was probably over a year old. So kind of crazy to think about. On the podcast, you hear me mention these opt-in offers on the podcast all the time. Once I started doing them consistently, that was really the inflection point for the Side Hustle Nation brand and business. And at that time, it was really just still a side project from my shoe business. And since then, it's turned into my main focus. Question 13 comes from Stephanie. She says, I'm working on creating my own blog and website, and I'll need to conduct some interviews over the phone. What technology do you use to record a phone interview so you can focus on the conversation rather than frantically taking notes? So, Stephanie, you can record with a free Google Voice number. If you just hit 4, I believe, during the call, it's going to send you an MP3 file afterwards. But I've recorded with Skype since episode 1 of the podcast. The issue I had is late last year, my call graph recording software stopped working. My guess is due to a Skype software update. So lately I've been playing around with a voice over IP tool called Zencaster and another Skype recorder called Amolto, Amolto. And the most recent interview episodes were all recorded with Amolto. So hopefully they sound okay. If they don't, let me know in the comments if you notice anything funky about that. Question 14 comes from Shane. He says, hey, quick question out of curiosity. The podcast highlight reel show notes are great. I actually usually look at them instead of the podcast when I don't have time to listen. But what's the benefit of making them a PDF instead of putting them up on your site, where I would assume they would help you more with SEO? So this is a great question, Shane. Actually, a few people have asked this or similar questions. So it's definitely a trade-off. So I keep them off the site and use them as opt-in bait. And that's a strategy that's worked, really, really well in the last 2.5 years, because probably 2/3 of my email list has come from those highlight reels. And then I include them in the newsletter, actually at a subscriber's suggestion. So people who've already opted in don't have to punch in their email again to get the new ones. I've also used those highlight reels to turn into books like the Side Hustle Path series, and even segments of buy buttons came or originated in those PDF downloads. Now, that's not to say you can't publish something that's already online in blog form, but it did make me feel a little bit better about, repackaging it and charging for it, knowing that it was already kind of positioned as like a premium piece of content. Question 15 comes from Bill. He says, my new idea is to start selling on Amazon FBA. I signed up with a pro seller account, downloaded the Profit Bandit app. Now I need to find inventory to sell. What do you think would be a good way to start? I would be happy to make a few $100s a month. So, Bill, I think that is definitely feasible. I haven't done much sourcing lately, probably in the last year or so, but everything I've bought to resell so far has just been from local stores like Walmart, Target, Home Depot, Office Depot, Walgreens, and ended up making about $650 in the year or so that I was sourcing locally. I think if I had dedicated more time to it and educating myself, I'm really confident I could have gotten to the few $100 a month level or beyond. Now, one resource to check out might be my chat with Asad Siddiqui, where he gets into online sourcing to save time. So that's episode 157 of the Side Hustle Show. Question 16 comes from Markeen. She says, I'm currently experiencing a quarter life crisis. I've always wanted to start my own business, but I don't know what or where to even begin. Plus, I have this doubt telling me that I'm not good enough. I know this is just an excuse, especially coming from my current field of work where I just don't feel it's important to what I want in my life. So one thing I would like to know is what made you silence your doubt of not being good enough? So this is actually a really important question, Markeen. I think self-doubt is something that always sticks with us, or maybe it comes to us with age and maturity. If you have self-doubt, that's probably a good sign, because I wish I had half the confidence I did. I wish I had half the confidence today as I did when I was 16. Now, the only way I think I've improved as a business owner, as a blogger, as a podcaster, and even as a husband and a father is through practice. Like every expert started as a beginner, right? It's okay to suck at the beginning. It's expected. It's like a rite of passage in a way. Good enough is relative. You don't have to be good enough to be an all-star. You just have to be good enough to start and then get better every day. Like every World Series hero, started out in T-ball 25 years ago. But we just don't see that part of the journey. Actually, one more sports analogy. Indulge me here. So I was on the swim team as a kid. Like this is probably like when I'm 10 or 12, and I'm getting discouraged that I kept losing my races. And it didn't really take long before mom and dad pulled me aside and explained, like, look, Nick, you're really only racing against yourself. Your goal doesn't have to be to get first place. Your goal should be to beat your time from the last race. And after that, swimming got much more fun and actually became a really important part of my life all the way through high school. Now, let's take a time out to thank the sponsor for today's show, which is SaneBox. Now, I'd heard of SaneBox before, but never tried it before this year. Even though I get a lot of email and it's one of the pain points that I shared earlier, I thought I had a pretty good handle on it with a bunch of different filters and tabs set up in Gmail. Now, SaneBox has really opened my eyes to how few messages I really need to see after, plugging it in this year. It's kind of crazy, actually. And one cool thing is I still have access to everything that hits my inbox. It just goes to a folder called Sane Later. And at first, there were some false positives like, okay, no, that message really should go to the main inbox, and you just drag it over there, and vice versa. But their filtering algorithm, I'm not sure how it works, is scary smart. Now, as someone who sends email and obviously wants my Side Hustle Nation newsletters to hit your main inbox, I was a little hesitant to recommend SaneBox as a sponsor here. But if email is sucking time away from your business or from your family, you got to check it out. Sanebox.com/sidehustle will get you a free 2-week trial and also hook you up with a $20 credit on any of their paid plans. Again, that's Sanebox, SANEBOX.com/sidehustle. All right, let's jump back in here for the last few questions. Number 17 comes from Anthony. He says, I started doing research on side hustles and how to start a business on the side. I began listening to your podcast. I've binged up to around episode 50 right now. Well, Anthony, the best is yet to come. And I'm extremely interested in starting my own side hustle. However, I'm not sure where I should start or what skill I could translate to a new business. I'm interested in / learning about fitness and finances and investing. I'm considering starting a blog for fitness and finance to share my journey, post content, and review products. I know those two topics are not related, and most of this has been written before. Whether this is a lucrative idea for a side hustle or not, or if it at least provides some accountability to keep up with these things, let me know. So, Anthony, a couple things that stood out in your message. So first, obviously, I'm a little biased, but I do like blogging. It started out as a fun, creative outlet for me and has turned into a full-time business. Of course, it took 8 years or so to make that happen with another business in the middle. You can visit blogstartercourse.com, check out my free video series on how to get your own blog up and running. A couple things. So there are a lot of fitness sites out there, and there are a lot of finance sites out there, but there are probably pretty few finance plus fitness sites, which could be a compelling angle. Could be. I don't know. It's always hard to validate these things. But take example, what Steve Kam's done over at nerdfitness.com, right? There's, a ton of fitness sites. We found a different niche to it, like how to be, nerdy and fit, I guess. On the business idea front, a business that hasn't been done before is a risky business. So I would guess to say, go look at what else is out there and see how you might be able to pivot it or put your own unique spin on it. Like one that came across my desk just this month is a service called unicorngo.com, and they sell graphic design services. People have been paying for graphic design services for decades, but their unique spin is selling it as a lower priced monthly subscription package. Question 18 is from Mark. He says, I'm on the hunt for some engaging language, requesting a consulting referral from a non-client. Would you assist? In the past, I've been referred to Alan Weiss's template as follows, but frankly, I find it cold and generic. And then he pastes in the template here, which is pretty cold and generic. Okay, Mark. So this is actually a really good question. How do you get, referrals? How do you turn your network into your network's network, right? How do you get referrals from people you're not even doing business with? So when people ask me for referrals, it's tough to pick someone or something out of thin air. Like I always did better on multiple choice tests at school. So one thing that might be interesting to try is to stalk your clients' LinkedIn connections. Like if you hit their profile page and you hit the part that says 500 plus connections or however many they have, it's going to show you a list of all their connections. That way you can narrow down that field by keyword. So if you type in like marketing and see if you have any ideal prospects in there. So if you're like a marketing consultant, you could, find this non-client that you want a referral from, hit up their LinkedIn page, do this search so you find out who they're connected to. Hey, would you mind referring me to Jim? Would you mind referring me to Bob? Would you mind referring me to Jill? And that way you can come back to your client or your non-client with a list of, 3 or 4 potential referrals. It's a lot easier then to say, yeah, I think actually that might be a good fit, or, I'm happy to pass along an introduction or reach out on your behalf to see if they'd like to connect. So that's probably how I would go about reaching, trying to get referrals from non-clients. Let me know if you try that out. Let me know how that works. I felt pretty good about coming up with that one. Okay, question 19 comes from someone calling himself, perhaps ironically, Best Writer, asks, please, can you sell email list of a responsive USA members to me? And so he's asking if I could sell him an email list of people in the United States. And unfortunately, the answer is no, absolutely not. You don't even want to do that. Plus, so like buying an email list maybe it seems like the fast track, but it's really only a fast track to getting your messages marked as spam and probably making, whatever email account you're sending from pretty worthless. Like that's definitely not something you want to do. Instead, try and consider, how else are you going to get in front of that target audience through email? Maybe you can sponsor a newsletter. Maybe you could propose some joint venture. Maybe you could write a guest post like Michelle from Making Sense of Sense did, and she got a shout in the newsletter last week. Or, making a guest appearance on the podcast. Like those are all ways you can get in front of somebody's email list without buying it. Plus you just that's not, you don't want to do that. That's like not permission marketing as Seth Godin would say. And finally, question number 20 comes from Adrian. He says, you got me thinking about some productized services I do. Quick question. Would you recommend testing the market on a platform like Fiverr first or launching independently and trying to hustle for some customers instead. My assumption is that the Fiverr option will get me more customers faster, but could devalue the service and prevent me from taking those customers outside the platform. My response was, I really like Adrian's approach of using Fiverr as a testing ground, as a proving ground for new service ideas and even new product ideas. Like we heard from Kendall in last week's show at sidehustlenation.com/218. We'll get you over there, who she ended up doing $100,000 in profit on Fiverr in a little under 18 months. So there's definitely a market over there, but I can understand the concern too. Like, do you really want to set up shop on the $5 marketplace? And that's a completely fair question. So the question for Adrian is, do you think there's a way to offer a bite-sized version of your service on Fiverr and use that as a way to perhaps generate leads for the main service or the flagship service? For example, when I was doing the $5 website audits, it would have been the perfect lead-in to a much broader, a much bigger scale, like full, web development business. And Fiverr, because I had people asking me all the time, like, hey, can you this information is great. Thank you for your feedback. Can you just do what you said you were going to do? Or can you just make the recommended changes? It's like, no, sorry, that's not really my focus. But if I had, the business on the back end to support that, it absolutely would have been a fantastic lead generator. And Fiverr gives you the tools to sell now at much higher price points on the platform. Like we heard from Kendall with the tiered pricing packages, and her average order, be $500, $900. And you can do custom offers, like we heard from a narco fighter, up to $10,000. Might take a little bit of more work kind of at those devalued rates to build up your profile enough to get there. But I think there's definitely room for premium positioning on the site. And like we talked about, definitely a super fast way to test out a new idea. That's it for me. Notes and links from this episode are at sidehustlenation.com/Q&A3. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, let's go out there and make something happen. And I'll catch you in the next edition of the Side Hustle Show, where we're going to dive into some advanced SEO tactics to get more traffic to your site. I'll see you then. Hustle on.
Thanks for listening to the Side Hustle Show at www.sidehustlenation.com.